Today we're diving into one of the most powerful and, frankly, fascinating forces in American politics, the alliance between Donald Trump and the evangelical movement. How did this unlikely partnership even happen, and what does it really mean for the country?
Okay, so here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the deal itself, then the theological argument that makes it all tick. We'll meet the key players making it happen. After that, we'll get into the real-world results, the new ideology it has created, and finally, we'll ask the big question, what does this mean for the future?
All right, let's start at the very beginning, with the core of this relationship. Now, this is not just your standard political endorsement, no. Analysts call it a political-religious symbiosis, a deep partnership that's literally changing the face of both politics and faith in America.
And this quote right here, it gets to the absolute heart of the strategy. See, Trump isn't presented as some kind of spiritual guide. He's a fighter, a protector. His job isn't to be a perfect model of the faith, but to be a guardian for the faithful in a world they feel is becoming more and more hostile.
So what does symbiosis actually mean here? Well, it's a pretty straightforward deal, really. A transaction. Trump gives them the raw executive power to get their agenda passed, and in return, evangelical leaders deliver a massive, highly motivated, and incredibly loyal voting bloc. It's that simple.
Okay, so here's the big question, right? How is this whole alliance justified, theologically speaking? Especially when you're talking about a leader whose personal life often seems to clash with evangelical values. Well, the answer lies in a very specific and very powerful biblical story.
It's all about what's called the King Cyrus analogy. The idea is that Trump isn't supposed to be a pastor-in-chief. He's seen as a flawed, worldly leader, kind of like a pagan king, who has been chosen by God as an imperfect vessel to protect Christian values and get the nation back on track.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because this comparison perfectly captures the debate happening inside evangelicalism. You have supporters pointing right to Isaiah chapter 45 saying, see, God uses imperfect leaders. But then you have critics, like Russell Moore, pointing to the very next chapters which warn that tying your faith to worldly power can lead to arrogance and a great fall.
So an alliance this powerful doesn't just happen on its own. You need people on the ground making it work, day in and day out. Let's pull back the curtain and meet the architects of this movement, the people who connect the politics of the White House with the faith in the pews. Think of it like a team where everyone has a very specific role. You've got Paula White-Cain, who provides the spiritual cover and gets the charismatic churches fired up. Then there's Franklin Graham, who brings that family name and moral legitimacy to the rural base. Tony Perkins is the political mastermind, the strategist behind the scenes. And you have Linda McMahon, who's in charge of executing the crucial education agenda. Okay, so we've talked about the deal, the justification, and the players. But what about the results? This isn't just talk, it's about a very real, very specific agenda. So what has this alliance actually accomplished?
For many, this was the #1 goal, the absolute grand prize, reshaping the Supreme Court. The appointment of not one, not two, but 3 conservative justices, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett, was seen by many evangelicals as a direct answer to decades of prayer, and it ultimately led to the overturning of Roe v. Wade.
But the wins didn't stop there, not by a long shot. The agenda also included bringing back and even expanding the Mexico City policy, which cuts funding to international groups involved with abortion. They moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, a massive goal for Christian Zionists, and they created a commission specifically to defend religious liberty.
And beyond the big policies, symbolic moves are incredibly important. Take this number, 23. A key plan outlined in Project 2025 involves pardoning 23 pro-life activists. Now, that kind of action is specifically designed to send a crystal-clear message of loyalty back to the base.
Education has been another huge area of focus, and there's a clear 4-step plan here to break what they call the public school monopoly. It starts with creating new tax-free Trump accounts for private school, then using tax credits to funnel money to religious schools. Step 3 is using executive orders to get rid of things like DEI and so-called gender ideology. And the ultimate goal? Dismantling the entire federal Department of Education.
So when you put all this together, this deep blend of politics and faith, you get a specific worldview that researchers have given a name to, American Christian nationalism. But what does that really mean? And just how many people actually believe in it? At its very heart, American Christian nationalism, or ACN for short, is the belief that America was founded to be a Christian nation, and that it should stay a Christian nation.
People who hold this view believe that this identity is under attack from secular forces and that it's their duty to protect and restore it.
And listen, this isn't some tiny fringe movement we're talking about. A recent survey from the Public Religion Research Institute found that 11% of Americans are full-on adherents of this ideology. Add to that another 21% who are sympathizers. So you're looking at nearly 1/3 of the entire country that is either on board with or sympathetic to these ideas.
Now, ACN isn't just one single thing. It's more like a big tent, a coalition of different theological streams. You've got charismatic dominionists who want to take over the 7 mountains of culture, like government and media. You have Calvinist nationalists who want to see society run by biblical law. And you even have Catholic integralists who want to merge church and state. They have different ways of getting there, but they all share that same basic goal: more Christian influence over America.
So that brings us to the final and maybe most important part of the story. What are the long-term consequences of making this alliance official? What happens to things like democratic norms and to faith itself when they get this tangled up?
Well, one major outcome that researchers are pointing to is a potential cultural crackdown. What does that look like? It could mean using executive orders to conduct ideological purity tests at places like museums and slashing federal funding for public media like NPR and PBS, which are often seen as hostile to Christian conservative values.
But here's the thing. Maybe the most profound change isn't what's happening to the country, but what's happening to American evangelicalism itself. The argument from critics is that a movement that was once defined mainly by its theology is now being defined by its political identity. And that shifts the primary goal away from spreading the gospel and toward preserving political power.
And that really leaves us all with a pretty heavy question to think about. When a faith becomes so intertwined with a political identity, what's gained in terms of power and influence? And what, if anything, gets lost along the way? For faith, for politics, and for the future of democracy.
So let's do a super quick recap. What started as a transactional deal has blossomed into a deep political, religious symbiosis. It's held together by a unique theological story, driven by a team of key architects. It's produced major policy wins, and it has supercharged the rise of a powerful political ideology known as American Christian nationalism.
If you want to dive deeper into any of this, we've linked all the sources we use to put this explainer together for you right down in the description. Thanks so much for watching.